if you talk more about property and SMSF, a lot of the questions that people tend to ask is, what is the minimum amount? Of course, you can set up an SMSF for even $1,
That's true.
if it
Yeah.
suits you. What is the bare minimum amount that we should consider when we are thinking about buying a property in SMSF, for example?
I mean, it really depends. I mean, if you ask ASIC, they'll say, don't put your money in self-managed super until you have 500,000 in your super. Okay. Initial advice about 5 years ago, they said if you have 100,000, you could start your SMSF, no problem. Then they changed the advice to 250. Now they have removed that advice altogether. I said it's up to you, whatever you want to do. Okay. But don't make any mistakes when you buy, making sure that whatever you invest in, it's you do proper due diligence and get a proper advice from financial planner.
100%.
So
100%.
there's no, I would say at least 250,000. That's my personal opinion, no? That if you have at least 250,000, then it's cost effective at the same time, and you have enough as a deposit to buy a property if you are going towards that advice to buy a property in Self-Managed Super Fund. If you want to
Definitely.
invest in shares only, say you can start with 150,000 as well. It is important to understand regulatory bodies, they want you to make sure that you invest in diversified in environment. Okay, you just don't invest all your money in one investment. Okay, though they allow you to invest in one, there's nobody is stopping you to invest in any particular in particular asset class if you like, but you have to make sure that you have done your due diligence on that. So for property, yes, you can start with 150,000. I think it should be minimum $250,000, which makes sense in terms of cost and the deposit side of things as well.
And
If you want to
it's
borrow,
important to understand that even from a bank's perspective, there would be money required to borrow,
that's
which is
true.
usually around 20% deposit of whatever the quality asset that you want to buy. And you want to buy a good quality asset in superannuation or SMSF fund. But what's also important is that the bank would leave some liquidity back, between 5% to 10%, depending on who the borrower is, who the lender is in the fund. And so you combine the two together, $200,000 up to $250,000 seems like a realistically good amount where you're leaving a bit of liquid cash within SMSF while you're using a portion of that money towards buying a property. The other important point that you make, which is quite important, is from an asset perspective, superannuation is not there for you to gamble. It's not there
That's
for
true.
you
Yes.
to, play around. A lot of people naturally think that, oh, it's because it's not impacting my lifestyle right now, or I'm not sacrificing my lifestyle, I can make risky choices in SMSF. Well,
Mm.
yes, you can, and no, you should not,
Mm.
because you can, because you are just because you have a free hand to make those choices, you should not, because ultimately this is your retirement fund. And so, making any errors in superannuation could be very detrimental on having a really poor
That's true.
retirement.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's a very important. And so let's talk about the type of properties first in super. And so I see a lot of property or sales agents, pushing for house and land packages or pushing for
Mm.
off the plan properties. And these days they've become sort of quite tech savvy, or should I say, quite sort of technical. And they'll
Mm.
say, a fully paid, fully built house and land package. So, we know that, you can't do construction in SMSF, but they'll do a single line contract these days with Super, such that, you can actually start buying some of these finished products in Super as well now. And so it comes down to that, okay, why as buyers agents or as property advisors, we always force people or always advise people, not force people, to go for established properties, because growth is a lot more important when it comes to properties within SMSF than yields. Of course, yields are important. Don't get me wrong, that yield is not important at all, because the rates attracted by SMSF are quite substantially higher than what you would pay a normal mortgage in a normal environment. But the growth is what's going to basically put your portfolio on steroids. I always say this, that the rent that you're going to get, or the yield that you're going to get, is enough to get the income going and the normal management of the SMSF. But the growth is what's going to get you out of the rat race, especially when it comes from the retirement perspective.
That's true. I mean, growth is really important within the self-managed environment, especially when you transition from your accumulation mode to your pension mode. Your growth is going to support you in your retirement life, basically, and that growth is tax-free after you retire. So it becomes a good tax effective vehicle at the same time in later stage of your life.